Welcome to the Wednesday, December 17th meeting of the Contra Costa Transportation Authority. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call.
Commissioner Hudson.
Here.
Commissioner Metcalf.
Here.
Commissioner Mitchoff.
Here.
Commissioner Glover is absent. Commissioner Butt.
Here.
Commissioner Abelson.
Here.
Commissioner Pierce.
Here.
Commissioner Durant has not yet arrived. Commissioner Arnerich.
Here.
Commissioner Taylor.
Here.
And Chair Romick.
Here.
Okay, very good. So, for the record, we have 10 commissioners present.
Okay, thank you. Public comment is an opportunity for people of the public to comment on issues and items that are not part of the agenda. I do not have any speaker cards. Is there anyone out there who would like to speak at this time? Thank you. On to, Denise, yes.
Thank you, Chair Romick. For the record, I'd also like to make note that we have ex officio representatives Myrna De Vera and Gail Murray here this evening. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. On to item 1.0, approval of the minutes.
So moved. Seconded.
I have a first by Abelson, second by Pierce. Any comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Okay. 1-0, how many? I'm going to say how many. 1, 2, 3. Read that one. Yeah. All in favor? One abstention. I'm trying to count how many. I ran out of fingers and toes.
Metcalf abstained.
Metcalf abstained. Thank you. Moving on to the consent calendar, item 2.0. Anybody want to pull anything or for further comments, or can I get a motion?
Move approval.
Second. I have a first by Pierce, second by Arnrick. Comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries unanimously. Item 3.0, major discussion items. There are none. Item 4.0, regular items, regular agenda items 4A12, I-8I 680 Auxiliary Lane, Segment 2, Project 106S2.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Ivan Ramirez, CCTA staff, and this is an action item. It relates to the I-680 Segment 2 landscape project in the town of Danville. This is the follow-up project to the auxiliary lanes that we completed over the summer. This is a follow-up project to do the landscape. With the board's approval, we administered the contract. We advertised the contract, and we received 4 bids, all below the engineer's estimate. After review of the bids, staff issued a letter of notice of intent to award the contract to the lowest bidder. Upon they receiving that letter, it triggers a protest period of about 5 days. On the last day of that period, we received a protest by the second lowest bidder. That triggered us to issue a letter to the lowest bidder to ask him to respond. We received that letter. Upon receiving the lowest bidder response letter, we examined the lowest bid, and we determined that the protest had no merit. So yesterday, we issued a second letter with a notice of intent to award to the lowest bidder. They received it today. That again triggers the clock. They will have 3 days upon which they can come back to us and ask for a hearing. Should they not ask for a hearing, then the matter is considered resolved as they accept our recommendation. When we brought up this issue at APC, one of the issues that came up was the timing of it, because if they don't ask for a hearing, then we can actually go ahead and award the contract right away, and that will put us several weeks from the next board meeting. So with that, APC recommended that authority to award the contract be given to APC from the full board. There's another piece of information here. Should the lowest bidder, or I should say the protester, come back to us and ask for a hearing, then the process might extend because we have to look at schedules and so on. But our goal will be to have that issue resolved by the January board meeting. So with that, I open up to questions.
Yeah, I would recommend that, and I would indeed move that we authorize staff to award the bid in the absence of a further protest, and then follow the process if there is one. And if it needs to go to the executive committee for action, that we authorize that action at this time.
Second.
Mike has a question.
Mike.
Yeah, really a question for council. Is the process, is there anything irregular about the process that we have been following in this particular instance?
You mean in terms of moving forward with a potential award in the event that there's no, that's acceptable. This, again, this assumes that we don't get a response within the next 3 days. Otherwise, we'll have to follow the bid protest process that's outlined in the staff report.
Any other questions? First by Pierce, second by Armour. All in favor? Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. Next bid on the Autonomous Vehicle Program authorization to utilize process similar to the contract change order approval process for the program as a memorandum of understanding to allow other manufacturers, equipment suppliers, governmental agencies, academic institutions, and other CE/AV program participants.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair Romick and Commissioners. My name is Jack Hall, CCTA Staff and ITS CV Program Manager. Tonight, I'm going to provide an overview of our CV-AV program, talk about jobs for Contra Costa, and request approval for an expedited MOU process. This slide shows the Concord Naval Weapons Station. Randy toured this site not too long after you hired him to be our executive director. At that time, Assembly Member Susan Bonilla asked Randy to bring jobs to Contra Costa and to the weapons station. I'm not sure if Randy thought he could bring the jobs right away, but he did say this is a perfect place to test autonomous and connected vehicle technology. The property size is 5,046 acres, making this the largest testbed site in the United States and likely the world. Our testbed includes buildings, rail crossings, underpasses, sidewalks, fire hydrants, basically a city with no people. One of the testbed highlights for CV-AV testing is 2 long tunnels that go under State Route 4. One of the main goals that got us to where we are today is the desire to bring jobs to Contra Costa. One of our program metrics is the number of startups that come in. We don't want to see jobs leaving the state. We have heard from the CV-AV sector that they want to stay in California, and a lot of their research facilities are here. Safety is another goal. Every year, more than 30,000 people are killed in traffic crashes in the United States. CV-AV technology will likely drastically reduce this number with the ultimate vision of 0 fatalities. Our other goals for the program include greenhouse gas reduction and increased multimodal mobility for Contra Costans. Each one of the bullets on this slide could possibly yield huge benefits for Contra Costa. Examples include automotive companies relocating their research facilities to Contra Costa, or at least developing satellite offices here. Another idea is to partner with local high schools on internship programs. CV-AV technology is the way of the future, As a program moves outside of the base and starts connecting city infrastructure, the CVAV program will encompass all of Contra Costa. The cost of this program is funded by private partners who need a place to test their technology, and future FHWA grant funding that should be awarded in September of 2015. This slide depicts the status of potential partners. We have already held initial meetings with many potential partners, and some have told us verbally that they want to be a part of this test bed. And what we are seeking from you tonight is the ability to sign MOUs with these potential partners. The partner categories include automakers, roadside equipment vendors, public sector agencies, research institutes, technology and communications, insurance carriers, analytics, affiliated testbed partners, and other organizations. So this program is bigger than just the weapons station testbed. The circle in the middle depicts the weapons station, and the outer ring depicts pilot projects such as transit tracking, truck tracking, I-80, I-680, and SR4 ICM and express lane projects, pedestrian and bicycle projects, just to name a few. Overall, this diagram represents the multimodal aspect of the program. I would like to recognize Habib Shamskow from Stantec, who is in the audience tonight. Stantec is our consultant, and they are staying on top of everything in the CVAV environment. Testbed topics that we are tracking include influencers, issues, features/applications, and technology. Since our first press release with Mercedes-Benz on October 1st, we have continued to make significant progress. In January, Randy is planning on announcing public and private partnerships that we have formed at the TRB annual meeting in Washington, D.C. And in March, we plan on having a CVAV summit to provide more public outreach and announce more partners. Lindsay has taken the lead on the summit with support from Stantec. One of the biggest points that I want to stress is that in no way are we going to affect the transfer of land from the Navy to the City of Concord. Mike Wright, the City of Concord Base Reuse Director, is also in the audience tonight. I want to thank him for all of his support that he has given us. He and the City of Concord are great to work with. Kristen Connolly is also in the audience. She's the Executive Director of the Contra Costa Economic Partnership. And the partnership is going to provide financial administration for the program. As a Section 501c3 nonprofit organization, she has more flexibility in handling funds than we do as a more traditional government agency. Our program management structure is in place, being led by our innovating Executive Director, Randy Iwasaki. So that concludes my presentation, and Randy, Ross, Lindsay, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
I have one speaker card. Yes.
Thank you, Chair Romick. I'd like to note for the record that Commissioner Durant has joined the meeting.
Thank you. Christian Conley.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Kristen Connolly. I am the Executive Director of the Contra Costa Economic Partnership, and I just wanted to recognize the tremendous opportunity that this is for our region, and thank you for your leadership in this area. It's an exciting collaboration, and as an economic development organization that has the membership of the largest jurisdictions in Contra Costa, as well as the county and the workforce board, we're really well positioned to help move this effort forward, and are honored to do so. So thank you very much, and I just want to thank you for your leadership.
I just want to, thank everybody that's been mentioned, but really our executive director, if it wasn't for him and his connection, we wouldn't be sitting here tonight. I move this item wholeheartedly. This is great for the entire county. This is great for the Bay Area. And you can see with Tesla and all the things that they're trying to push out, this is really going to put this, I think, Contra Costa County on the map in the Bay Area at the forefront of this worldwide. So pleasure to move this forward, and appreciate Ross and everybody. The acceleration of that chart, the one you had there before, really shows we can get those MOUs in place. This is fantastic.
That's seconded. He's a second. I have a question. I full disclosure, I did have a conversation with Randy about this earlier, but I want to ask the question publicly. Does the authority yet have a 1 to 2 page, preferably 1 page, story to tell on this? Because this is a real jewel. And I'd like to, from, on the theater that I operate in, I'd like to be able to say that this is what the authority is doing nowadays. One of the neat things. So is there such a thing beyond just a terse press release?
Commissioners, in this case, we actually work backwards. Normally, you ask for a white paper, and then we go out and do something. We did something, now we'll write the white paper later. So it's close. I mean, we have the basic outline of the plan that we want to accomplish. We've been going at a speed that I say it's work factor 8, in that we are really pushing hard to get these agreements in place. We have, it's going to take probably more, in order to depict what we want to do, we have these great charts, but it's going to take more than 1 or 2 pages, and you'll see pictures of the test bed and the various components that are centered around, and there's one of the slides that talks about AV, CV technologies and the things that we want to test with pedestrian interface, bike interface, and things like that in a secure location, which is phase 1. Phase 2 rolls out into the streets. What automobile manufacturers don't like is they do not like it when the mayor comes out and says, don't test in my community, and they're out there and they're gearing up to do that. And so what we've said to our partners is that we have at least 11 elected officials, and I haven't heard, hopefully I haven't heard any of you say, don't do this. And so we're saying that phase 2, we're going to go after some federal highway US DOT dollars to create a test bed in Contra Costa, which will, if we get that allocation, will upgrade your signals, your controllers, and all that infrastructure, and make it talk to the cars, and cars will talk to cars. And I think it's going to create a lot of job opportunities here in Contra Costa, because they'll have to move their facilities here. And so we're excited. So that's a long-winded answer. Yes, you'll get your 2-pager, 3-pager, so that you'll be able to articulate what this is all about.
No, you misunderstood. I said a 1-page or 2-page. Preferably 1 page. Now you're up to 3.
Okay, we'll give you 1 page.
Contain yourself.
1 page. We'll give you 1 page. Can I have both sides?
Is this
All right.
the way it's going to be tonight?
All right, done.
Yeah, first I'd like to commend our executive director for reaching one name status, Madonna, Tiger, Randy. If we could, for a moment, go back to some of these sponsors and some of the names. I was, and I'd kind of like to actually keep it, but I'm looking up there, Google, Apple, okay, AT&T, Xerox, I mean, it would be nice to get a hold of some of these companies and even advertise it to some extent through, because a lot of us are on TV, and let people know who is getting involved in this, because I think you're onto something here, Randy, that this just may take off, and we might be able to expand that. Might even have more interest in some of the other things we're doing in the county.
Commissioners, this would not have happened without Mike Wright and his ability to work with the United States Department of the Navy. When we called Mike, I can't remember what day it was, but when the press release went out, it was October the 1st. And I believe it was 4 months earlier, we sat down in his office and kind of went over this proposal. And he said, I think many years ago they did test, that the Army or the military tested some autonomous vehicles out here. I think that's a good fit. And he went out, and we had an agreement in, what was that, Mike, less than 2.5 months. Now, I don't think I could go through a normal process to get anything in 2.5 months. But he got that through the Navy in 2.5 months. Now, to me, having dealt with the Coast Guard and the Navy in my career, and that is like literally work factor 8. So if we didn't have a willing partner, because the easiest thing for Mike to say was, no, it doesn't fit into our scheme of things, and we want the transfer to occur. Instead, he said, I think that's a good idea. I think if I remember correctly, the testing for autonomous vehicles occurred years ago. Let me check. And that was the start of what I consider to be that is one of the reasons why we're here tonight showing you those partners, is because those private sector folks, they do not move slowly. They want to move very, very quickly, and if you can't keep up, there's a problem.
Well, there's another base the other end of the county too. I mean, it'd be nice if this took off a little bit, and like has been pointed out, the recognition. And it sounds like it's something people want. It just, you get the start and then build it a little bit. But I'm looking at some names up there, and well, we'll talk about that ad hoc.
We have met with the governor's office. It's called GoBiz, and they have an idea to create incubator hubs throughout California, and they have one earmarked for the East Bay, but they haven't been able to find a location. So we had a conversation with Lewis Stewart, I think he's a deputy director. And we worked together when I was at Caltrans. He was at DMV. He was an assistant to the director and the chief deputy at the time at DMV, and we used to have meetings with CHP, DMV, and Caltrans. And he's now saying, we need to get involved in this. And so sometimes when the state says we want to get involved, they try to take everything over, right? So we're kind of leery about that, but we're trying to get as many good ideas and starts that we possibly can to, once again, the ultimate goal is to create jobs. The first goal is to make sure that transfer of the property goes properly through the process from the Navy to the city of Concord. So thank you for the support. We really appreciate that.
Bob.
Yeah, it's not good to go last sometimes because they stole all my thunder. I had a prepared speech, but I would like to offer Brentwood. We have a lot of cornfields that are kind of vacant at times, and I see this as really a focal point of this part of the county, and also I see this is going to get recognition in an area that I agree. I think this is not going to just be United States-wise. I think that, as Mr. Biden said, and God help me to quote him, but this is a big deal. This is a big deal, and it's almost a quote. But I think what we really should be cognizant of is that whoever is going to be the spokesman for this, and it ought to be Randy and you, Leslie. You'll be part of it. But I just want to say what you say on this is really going to have effect, Randy. So I appreciate what you've done and whoever else is going to be involved. This is a big deal. The board is right. This is something to be reckoned with. And I'd love to test drive some of them cars. But anyway, I'm out.
Test ride, yeah, test ride, not test drive. Test ride.
Whatever. Just put me in it. Thank you.
I'd just like to make one comment. This fits in perfectly with the Northern Waterfront Initiative that we're working on. And if we can spin off some of these jobs into that Northern Waterfront area and into education of the folks who are in the highest unemployment area of our county in that Northern Waterfront area, that would be spectacular. So if we can build on this and incorporate, along with this effort, some education opportunities to keep those jobs here with these partners, we would be doing really, really well. So this is just the start of something huge. Thanks.
Kevin, if I can. Randy, I'm trying to go through the legend, Stantec, at a verbal teaming agreement. And I'm reading up there the research institutes, Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. Does that mean they've gone down there and they're setting up for a track, or they're ready to go in San Luis Obispo also? Or what does that mean?
So you're going to need, generally in these initiatives, you're going to need a non-biased educational institution to do some of the research for you. So it's not It's not Honda coming out saying, these are the results of my research, trust me. Versus, and at Cal Poly, the professor that we're dealing with is a guy named Rob Bertini. He used to be the deputy administrator at USDOT, which we're going to go after some money for the test bed phase 2. And so he's now the professor back at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, very knowledgeable about CV/AV technologies, the direction that we're headed, and they do a lot of research. So it's a great opportunity. UC Berkeley, Stanford have expressed interest as well. And then there's a university in China at Shanghai, Tongji University, that wants to do research on left turn assist. So we're getting a lot of phone calls from a lot of people trying to get into that spreadsheet there.
Yep. I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget. The motion by Argridge, second by Hudson. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries unanimously. On to 4B3, what we heard, review of comments received on the draft 2014 countywide transportation plan. Mr. Engel.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, authority members. We are hopefully on the approaching the home stretch on adoption of the 2014 countywide transportation plan, and we've completed our public outreach effort. Lindsay Willis is here to tell you about that. I just briefly want to touch upon and remind you of the schedule we are on. At this point, we've compiled all of the public comments. We have a very nice PowerPoint that Lindsay's prepared that will tell you what we heard from the public. We want to embark on another public outreach effort to communicate to the public what we heard, communicate back. And during that time also, we're looking very seriously at what are now 34 letters received from public agencies, and we're preparing the responses to those letters, and we're preparing revisions to the countywide transportation plan. And those will be taken, those will be reviewed at the staff level by your city planners at the CTP task force meeting in January. We're also going to share that with the Contra Costa planners. We will probably bring that all to the technical coordinating committee in February, and that would put us on a path towards adoption of the final countywide plan in March. As we do this, we are assembling the action plans, and the action plans are kind of the heart of the countywide transportation plan, and that we build up from the local jurisdictions to the regional committees, and then we knit together the action plans to create a countywide plan, a comprehensive plan. So WCTAC, TransPAC, and TransPlan already approved their action plans last December 11th and 12th, and Lomrin and SWAT will be in January of 2015. The last approval will come from SWAT in February of 2015, and so we will have from 5 of the RTPCs, we'll have what are called proposal for adoption action plans, which we then incorporate into the countywide plan. You adopt them, and then the RTPCs are free to go forward and implement them, because we're doing a full environmental impact report on the plan and the action plans. So that's the schedule, and with that, I'll hand it over to Lindsay so you can hear about our public outreach proposal.
Thank you, Martin. The testbed presentation's a tough act to follow, but hopefully you will be just as happy after this presentation as you were after the last one. Earlier this year, and just before I get started, for your information, you should also have my presentation as a handout in your file, so I'll probably go through it and skim a few items because I know that you'll all have a chance to look at it, and I don't want to be too repetitive. So just to refresh your memory, earlier this year, we undertook a public outreach effort around the countywide transportation plan, and we tried to be very proactive and go out and meet people where they were in their own spaces, where they were comfortable participating. And what you see on the screen in front of you is kind of a list of those different locations. We held public meetings. We did a telephone town hall for the folks who like to conduct most of their business online. We had an online participation tool. So we really tried to take a proactive approach and be out in front of people, make them aware we were going through this effort instead of expecting them to follow our business as closely as we do. One of the activities that we did were public workshops, and so what you see in front of you is just some of the attendance records. Overall, these were really positive events. The comments we got were very thoughtful. People really were very passionate about transportation in their neighborhoods and their communities, and we had really good attendance given that this happened kind of in August and September, which is a busy time with people getting back to school. We also had a telephone town hall, which was something new for the authority, and it's kind of similar to a radio call-in show where we had a little bit of an intro, and then we opened up the phone lines and let Randy and Martin answer questions, nearly blindly from the public. And we had a lot of participation. You'll see, that we had more than 250 people stay on the telephone for 40 minutes or longer because they were really interested in hearing the answers to people's questions. And we had 159 people try to get through to ask Randy and Martin a question. So this was, a new method that we tried, something that was really popular, and I think probably something we'll consider doing again in the future because it was a good way to reach a lot of people. Another first for the authority this year was the creation of an online participation tool where people could go and post their bright ideas, and that was online at keepcontracostamoving.net. And as you can see, we actually had more than 4,000 unique visitors to the website. So these were folks who weren't repetitive, because I was probably about 200 of that 5,216 numbers. I was checking it to make sure it was working during the course of this. And we had about 411 people take the time to create an account and vote for what they thought were their transportation priorities and give us their bright ideas. And those numbers below kind of direct, referral, social, organic. So direct is the number of people who actually typed in keepcontracostamoving.net to come to our site. They had seen that URL somewhere and knew it enough to type it in. Maybe they got it on a postcard, they saw it in the newspaper. The referrals were people who clicked through from another site. Social were the people who came from some of our social media sites like Facebook. The organic search were people who Googled it, and then email were people who came through from one of our emails. I hope these little banners look familiar to you, and hopefully they followed you around for months at a time. That was their intention. We also had an online advertising campaign where people could click on these ads, and we had two sets, one to invite people to the workshops and give them more information, and one to get them to participate in the tool. And I realized now that I'm always getting on Martin's case for using too many acronyms and not explaining them, and I have one up there that's probably new to some of you, the CTR, which is the click-through rate, which is basically the percentage of people who clicked through. And even though it's 0.06% total across the campaign, that's actually very decent in the marketing world. Doesn't look like a very big number up there. But what I want to point out is there are multiple types of online campaigns that were run. And if you look at the retargeting one, that percentage is much higher than the others. And what retargeting is if you were followed around by these ads, it meant you probably went to the authority's website or clicked on a transportation-related website during that time period, and that ad followed you around until you got so annoyed with it that you actually clicked on it to go through to our survey. So that's what retargeting is you went somewhere and I targeted you because of your interest, and that ad followed you around until you gave up and clicked on it to see what it was about. So it makes sense that that number is a little higher than the others because those were folks who tended to have some sort of interest in transportation during that time period. We also collected paper surveys for the folks who maybe aren't as enamored with digital engagement, and we sent these out to folks upon request. We got more than 250 surveys. You can see that the biggest participation was from Central County. Part of that was we had some requests from local senior centers and the Monument Crisis Center for large quantities, and those, were more likely to get returned. What was kind of interesting is that the 114 number of requests. So we did do postcard mailings, and we told people you can call in to request a survey or email in to request a survey. So we actually got 114 requests for us to mail a paper survey from people who emailed that request to us, which is a little unusual. In terms of the transportation priorities, we allowed people to pick their top 3 transportation priorities. And I wanted to show you kind of side by side what the priorities were for the folks who used the online participation tool versus the folks who took the paper surveys. And I think what's really interesting here, if you look at the paper survey side, programs for seniors and people with disabilities rated much higher than it did for the folks who use the online participation tool, and kind of some of the priorities are a little different. And I think that that's really a reflection of how people participated in our outreach effort. As I mentioned, quite a few of the paper surveys went to senior centers and folks who maybe need a little more assistance with transportation, and you can see that they rated that as a higher priority than some of the other items. I just thought it was interesting. We also took in emails, voicemails, comment letters, and you'll see under voicemails, I had a note that these are hyper-local focused, and I wanted to explain that term a little bit. Hyper-local is, it's probably best if I just give you an example. So we had this one voicemail from a very lovely lady who called multiple times and said, I'm homebound, I look out my window, and my street is 40 miles an hour, and these people are speeding. They're speeding every day, and we need more enforcement, and they're only speeding between 5 p.m. and 7 p.m., and I track it every day. So I need somebody to come out here and start writing tickets. So the hyper-local were really people who are seeing things on their street, in their front yards. There generally weren't comments about the larger community or larger problems. So to kind of fast forward a little bit to kind of what we actually heard with the public workshops, it's not really a surprise that the comments were very specific to the region that we were hosting the event in. And for the most part, the transportation priorities and the comments we heard at those workshops tracked kind of really closely with the telephone survey we did earlier this year. For the online participation tool, these were actually 7 of the top most liked comments, which we allowed people to like other people's comments. And you can see they really run a wide gamut from treating the Iron Horse Trail like a thoroughfare to build a BART to connect Walnut Creek to Dublin to taking a ferry to San Francisco. And the tool is still live, and you can still sort by category, what's most popular. We're going to keep it up for a while in that format, and I really encourage you to read some of the comments because most of them are interesting and intelligent. There's a few sales pitches in there that I haven't weeded out yet, but I think it's really a good reflection of what people are thinking about and what they'd like to see. The paper surveys, as I mentioned, because of where they were distributed and the mechanism, they really mirrored the public workshops, and the responses tended to skew a little older. These are people who had a lot of concerns about mobility and how they were going to get around without a car. The voicemails, as I mentioned, were people who were largely transit dependent, who were really interested in how do I get to my bus stop that used to be at the corner of my street that got moved. But the voicemails, I think, were also probably one of the most courteous groups of people we had. So even though they had very specific problems, they were very appreciative for the opportunity to connect, and they really were happy to have a voice in this process. They felt like they got invited, and the fact that we were responsive and we listened really meant a lot to them. Emails were definitely our most critical group of respondents, and I had a different graphic up here for PC that I changed. These were folks who really thought we were out of touch with what was happening on the streets. The folks who emailed in, thought that we had an office on Mars and we had no idea what was happening on our city streets. But they were also folks who really took the time to provide a lot of solutions. They were really thoughtful in how they thought we could fix it. So while they were very critical, they're also most likely to have what they thought would fix the problem and offer that up. This is just a kind of a quick summary of all of the comments that we heard across all of the different platforms. And you'll see there's a lot of strong support for transit down 680, corridor-wide improvements. I'm not going to read all of it. There's an item at the bottom that I put in bold, confusion about how the CTP is implemented and the decisions are made and how funding decisions are made. And I put that in bold because I think that that's really worth noting, that we still have a lot of work to do to educate people on the type of work we do and how we do it and how decisions are made. So I think that's a little bit my call to action, and all of our call to action, really, that, we're deciding really important stuff, but there's still a really big group of people out there who aren't exactly sure how we're doing it. And we need to help teach them that. Getting back to what we heard, also in your packets, we had a lot of folks who really expressed interest in wanting to know what their neighbors had to say. They wanted to stay involved in the process. We invited them into the room, and they want to stay. They want to be involved in making future decisions. So one of the things that we put before you tonight that is an action item is a communications plan to kind of relay back to our stakeholders, our partners, the public at large, what we heard and kind of what the next steps are in this process. And you'll see there's kind of multiple items that we're looking to do, kind of a simple 1 to 2 page handout that maybe has some fun graphics or infographics that will explain the participation and the key messages we heard. We're looking to do some press release. We're considering putting together some web videos that can be shared, that you guys can then put on all of your platforms. And all of the details are in your staff report on that. And the total budget for this is $127,500. That's our estimate for it. But I think what's really unique about this plan that I really want to stress is, in July you approved a public outreach budget, about $432,000. And we were really stingy with that money. We tried to be really efficient, and we actually didn't spend all of it. We have about $150,000 left. And so this kind of next step of communicating the results back to the public still fits within the original budget that you approved. So we're not asking for any more money. What the approval would be is kind of your approval to begin implementing this plan with the estimated budget. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions or comments.
Lindsay, just a great job. First of all, graphically, you did a wonderful job. And I think you're moving the bar up for some of our other staff members here. And it's always because we get a fresh face and everybody has a different idea. I think this is really great. I think that the next step you're suggesting is a good idea. The only caution I have is that the various types of ways we got input, I would be concerned that we say, here's what we've heard, and leave it there in a way that this is what we're going to do. Because when you get multiple sources of data like that, it's not fully vetted in terms of making sure it's representative of cross-section. It happens to be, it's kind of like in public life, we mainly see people that complain, right? People that are against things. We very, very seldom see people that are for things. And you have to know, as an elected official, what the rest of the world is thinking. So there are some things on there that I can understand based on the constituency of why they said that, but I'm just a little cautious in promoting it in a way that alludes that this is what we've heard and people expect us to do that. I think that there's a lot more vetting from a broad and deeper, more robust community as we start to move forward. If we go for, I think we're going to get a lot of input that's very focused, and I think that is has a different type of validity to it. So I guess in a long-winded way, just a little cautious in how we push this out. I think good information, but that's all.
Thank you. And I think to alleviate that concern a little bit, we have been working with the CTP ad hoc committee, and they will be able to review and vet anything before it gets sent out to the public and review the distribution channels to make sure there aren't any concerns.
Yeah.
Thank you. And yeah, great report. I agree with everything Newell said. I'm going to add a layer of caution because this, if you will, the sample size here is self-selecting and it's small, right? With a county of nigh on 1 million odd people, 4,000 unique visits to the website, not necessarily a statistically valid sampling, right? So I think we have to be really cautious in how we talk about it. Yes, this is the stuff we heard, and I think, yes, so far, and I think we have to figure out ways that we can actually sort of activate the very silent, very big majority here who hasn't yet spoken, because to focus too much on the engagement that we've had with folks, particularly in light of the fact that we've heard fairly consistently over the last couple of years that nobody knows who we are and what we do. And so to be clear and to be sure, these are folks who have an active and engaged interest. They know who we are. They've been very public in past efforts, from Measure C to Measure J to this. But I think one could go too far and draw too large a set of conclusions based on what I consider to be very small and limited data points. So I think we all have to sort of do a good job of trying to do outreach to make sure that we're actually hearing from the rest of the county. So thank you very much, though. Really well done. I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Martin Engelman, Deputy Executive Director for Planning. And you have before you a question, really, on whether we want to do a study of transit options on the I-680 corridor. And one of the things you just heard from Lindsay is that whenever we reached out to the public, we seemed to get a resounding amount of concern about congestion on I-680 and the lack of transit options. Now, everybody knows we do have a few express buses to Bishop Ranch. It is possible to take BART from Walnut Creek to Dublin, but you have to go around the sea and into Oakland, and it takes about a little over an hour. So we heard from the public that they are interested in creating some or developing some options for the I-680 that could relieve congestion. At the sub-regional level, in Central County, the Transpac Committee just recently approved their proposal for adoption, and they have in their action plan an action that says support the efforts of the authority to evaluate congestion relief strategies along the I-680 corridor, including transit options and new technologies. In the Loma Action Plan, which is yet to be approved by the LPMC, but it was reviewed by the TAC, their draft plan actually included an action to support and seek additional funding for expanding transit service, including service between Loma Linda BART stations and adjacent communities in Central County, service on Pleasant Hill Road, service to Bishop Ranch and the Tri-Valley area, and service through the Caldecott Tunnel. At the TVTC level, South County, the TVTC TAC met on November 3rd, and they are recommending to their board to add an action to re-examine the I-680 investment options study, and I'll tell you a little bit about that study. So we've got a lot of interest, I think, in doing some kind of a study, and it's not the first time that this would have been done. There are a number of studies that are presented in the board packet that have looked at this. And this, what I'm holding in my hand here is the I-680 Investment Options Analysis Report that was actually done back in 2002, adopted in 2003. And we were looking for investment options on I-680 for the Measure J renewal, which the voters approved in 2004. And out of this study, actually, came some recommendations. But it looked at BART underground, it looked at BART in the median, it looked at BART parallel above, east-west of 680. It looked at light rail in all along the corridor, busways, express bus, HOV in the median, hot lanes. Those were evaluated, but this study, granted, it's more than 10 years old now. So there are a lot of new technologies out there that are not included in this study, and those could include springing off of the autonomous vehicle test bed technologies, and also having a new kind of transit system that requires less labor. For example, the Oakland BART connection, maybe that's not the best thing to bring up right now since it didn't work so well last week, but something like that that's quiet, that's on rubber wheels or runs on a cable. So we have in your packet a couple of suggestions. We're asking you whether or not you want to do a study on I-680. We have 3 options described in here. Option 1 is to do nothing. Option 2 is to build upon this 2003 study, go back and revisit it. And option 2 is a smaller study, and we estimate it cost about $250,000 to freshen up this study, including updating all the forecasts. Where do people come from? Where do they go? And then adding also the new technologies side to it, looking out and finding out what's new out there. And option 3 is a much larger study, $1 million, and it's more like what we're doing, considering doing in West County, which is a high-capacity transit study, which is very comprehensive, looks at all the options, examines them. I believe it includes a public outreach process and also getting a little deeper into the cost estimates and the feasibilities of all the options. And then option 4 is to do, in parallel with either of these, modern-day communications outreach techniques by asking commuters, employers, and residents along the corridor for their ideas on how best to improve the corridor. So I won't call it crowdsourcing, but it is essentially asking those who are stuck in traffic, what do you think we should do, and getting their ideas and seeing if they have solutions. The Planning Committee recommended moving forward with a larger study. And if we do the larger study, that would require federal funds, and it would require the federal procurement process. I have to say that since that time that the Planning Committee met, I have had further discussions with the consultant who prepared this investment options study, and that was Bill Loudon, who's in the audience. Bill is with DKS, and he has told us that the smaller study would include looking at new technologies, so we're pleased to have that. Timing-wise, the smaller study could be done using local funds. It could be done through a sole source procurement process. It would probably take about 6 months, which is favorable from the standpoint of coming up with new ideas that we could possibly put into an expenditure plan for consideration. The larger study, option 3, since it's fairly expensive, would require federal funds. We'd have to garner those over a number of years. We would have to do the federal procurement process, and I think we're looking there at 18 months to 2 years to actually complete that study. So it's really up to you to decide at this point. The Planning Committee recommended that we go with the larger study, and we heard some comments from members of the public as well to do the larger study. Staff is now coming back and reconsidering and thinks that we can probably get more bang for the buck if we do a faster track, smaller study, and if there is some gem of an idea that comes out of that study, we could then certainly move further along and expand the analysis of that preferred alternative through further studies. So with that, I'll leave it up to you for discussion and decision and direction. Thank you.
Before I ask for questions, we have a speaker card. Mr. Rick Remus here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. I just wanted to, I saw this on the agenda tonight. I personally have not been tracking this that closely, and I thought, you know, I need to come down and let you all know that at County Connection, we've actually been talking about this corridor in the last 2 years as the congestion has increased tremendously. And it actually started first as a discussion about buses being late. Can't get our buses to Bishop Ranch on time anymore. So I just want to let you know that we would be pleased to work with you on whatever you decide to move forward with. We don't have any predisposed notions on how that happened in the corridor, but I think as time marches on, this idea is going to grow legs and people are going to want some sort of transit improvements. And there's a lot of different choices, I think, to look at. And I think a study, however you proceed, is a good way to go. And we support that at County Connection. Thank you.
Dave.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out at the planning committee, it was held on a very rainy night, and one of our members couldn't get here, though he wrote a note. They wouldn't let me put it in on the vote. So if he's quiet at this moment, I'm going to finish the next meeting before he gets here, too.
In time, in time.
Yeah, I got a call from our planning director in Moraga just before this meeting, and she had just gotten out of a meeting of the SWAT TAC group, and apparently there was quite a discussion there. And I see Lisa Bobadilla is here from San Ramon, who she was cited in the conversation earlier today, on good terms. I got the impression that the TAC group was caught a little bit by surprise by this item. And when I read the item, read the staff report, I also was caught by surprise. I said, "Whoa, what is happening here?" I had heard. I've been involved with the authority now for close to 10 years, and I had heard that there was a study done, but until you just waived it, I've never seen it. All I know about it is anecdotally. I would like to know more about what's in that study. I think probably my colleagues on SWAT would like to know a little bit more about what's going. What was the thinking? Mr. Loudon, Dr. Loudon did that study. Would love to hear what he has to say. He always presents things really well. So I think that the staff at SWAT would like to know just what the current thinking is and what's happened in the past to try to get their hands around how do they think the study ought to be prosecuted. And this would also bring in CCCTA in the thinking. And so maybe it's a little premature to say, okay, let's go ahead and spend either $250,000 or $1 million, because it doesn't look like it's all that well thought out yet. And this is one where I think, clearly the public wants something like this done. So if we're going to do it, we got to do it right. So maybe it's time to think this thing through in the month of January. Maybe like in February, come back and say, here's what the plan might want to be. And let's not rush into this thing precipitously.
High-level view, I think we need to do this. And I understand, Mike, what you're saying is that we don't normally bypass our TCPs. But the previous study was generated from the RTCP, from SWAT. And, there's a lot of politics behind it. Politics have changed. There was to be blunt, there was a fairly conscious effort done 12 years ago, even going back about 18 years ago, that there would never be any transit going down the San Ramon Valley. I think the reality is the congestion. You can ask this gentleman who has to come every time we have this meeting from Pleasanton, and he can leave an hour to take what should be about a 22-minute trip, or he can leave 2 hours. And either time, he could still be late because the variable now is so great. Clearly, there's some indication even in the public outreach, as we saw a little bit earlier, that people, the average person would like to see something done there. I think that staff's recommendation is to go with option 2 with a little caveat of 2 things. And option 2 is because we can do it quickly. If we are going to go out and seek additional funding from our voters, we have to have something to ask for the funding for, which we don't have a robust list. We don't have the Caldecott Tunnel. We don't have East County. There may be an opportunity to solve a real problem in the San Ramon Valley, which is gridlocked. It has been gridlocked now for about 3 months. So after Labor Day weekend, there is not a night. It's the most, you have to say, well, what changed? The economy, and all the kids were back to school. Because over the summer and last spring, it was okay. Something has dramatically happened in there. We're not necessarily having more accidents. The auxiliary lane projects has actually helped improve the accident rate. But I think going back to DK Associates, because they were on there, we can do a sole source. The only way to get a study done is that portal, to go through that particular spot because we're allowed to do that. Otherwise, waiting 2 years to do it, we're going to miss an opportunity. And I think the San Ramon Valley should have the opportunity. We didn't spend a whole lot of money. And if you think about the auxiliary lane project, I got the check after we had appropriated the money and wrote a check back for 100% of the funding that came from this agency. So it was zero cost. So it might be the right time, and I'm not on SWAT, but I'm from that area. I think now's the time to go back and do this. And it will tell us, my charter to staff is if we go back to DK Associates on this particular, because they did the original study, is expand it out, get the new data, update it. What are the new opportunities? What are the things we can do based on environmental concerns? All of those. Come back, and it may say, here's 2 options. Then let's vet that out at the RTCP at SWAT here as quickly as we can, and then zone in on one of those and really say that's the one that's we're going to go after. If we don't do that, we will miss it in our lifetime to do anything in the San Ramon Valley. There will be no other way to do it. So I'm willing, even given all of the history of politics, BART did a study and said they'll never do anything down the San Ramon Valley. And they did that without even talking to anybody in the San Ramon Valley, to be honest. So I think this is a good opportunity. There's timing to this, so it didn't quite go through the normal processes. If I were sitting on my own RTCP, I want it to go through that because this is how we created this organization. Our staff to get a little opportunity to do it. Putting that aside, I think we can circle back, vet out some of those things, make sure the criteria, it's looking at the right things. But I think my recommendation is I would go for the option 2 with a caveat to get that input from SWAT and, do a really robust update looking at modern technology. And given that the traffic is worse than what was predicted, and then take it from there.
As a point of, Newell, are you saying 2 with 4, that option?
Yeah, 2 with 4, because the fact is we do need some public outreach on this because I think just, quite honestly, the elected leadership at the time was the only voice that I recall happening, and they were pretty unanimous against doing anything. So you know what? I don't want to have a hangover and do a study. I want to have a study that has a clear idea of what we're going to do and be open-minded about it.
Mr. Durant.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My note to Randy, for what it's worth, was that it seems, if you will, premature to go for something bigger than option 2. I don't know or understand enough about how the idea came up, but $1 million, even in the grand scheme of our budget here and the kinds of things we do, where sometimes $1 million feels like a drop in the bucket, it's still serious money. And when I went through at least the portions of the 2003 study that were in the planning committee packet, a couple of things stood out to me, which is, for example, and let me just sort of read them. The connectivity issue that was addressed there, and I'm on page, what I think is 36 of that document, was that there were 4 options that were discussed. D filled the gap in the regional HOV network. B and C also connected to the regional transit network, but would require modal transfers, blah, blah, blah. But one of the things that was talked about in that document was the need or desire for exploring hot lanes and for high occupancy of a different kind. I'm trying to find, here's the HOV facilities express bus package, the HOV lane and ramp improvements plus additional express bus service was option D. Option E was HOV to HOT lane conversion. My point in bringing it up is the stuff that was articulated there, we've actually taken some steps toward, but we don't have any data to go from because these things haven't been done yet. So I don't know what we would actually be studying. At the end of the day, if we believe that we're expanding the hot lane system, that we're going to do these other things, it does seem to me premature to invest a whole bunch of money in a brand new study when we haven't even done the stuff that was articulated here and that we've already said we're willing to explore. So for me, without more data, more information about why do something more than this now, to me the option that was the $250,000 spend that really updates, identifies new technologies and things, but also it kind of will look at what's already on the table that we've looked at and identified over the last 10 years or 11 years and said, yes, we want to pursue and that we're going to pursue, but we actually haven't yet. I don't want to spend money to go over the same stuff again. That sort of offends my sensibilities, and that's sort of strong language, but it's part of the thing that I don't get here, which is why this, why now, as opposed to waiting until we've done a little bit more evolution on what we had talked about previously. So I like option 2 with option 4. No, it's fair to ask the clarification. Option 2 with option 4 makes perfect sense. Again, the presentation from earlier tonight fits a bit into option 4. There's a lot of new stuff going on. But anyway, I sort of don't like the notion that you go from study to study and there's not, you start reinventing the wheel over again every time. Doesn't sort of tickle my fancy.
Karen.
Just so everybody knows, the Planning Commission made the recommendation without all this information. And we asked for all this information so that when it came to all of you, we could have the conversation. And that's why we recommended the full-blown study. I think, I'll let the other colleagues who were there speak for themselves. I'm happy to go with option 2 along with 4. But we didn't have this information, and we specifically asked for it. And so that is why you're getting I don't think we have to speak against what the recommendation was, because now we have the information that we needed to make a more informed decision.
I'm just curious, and I'm not looking for a detailed answer, but what the differences and similarities are with the West County study. The West County study, I think, is an RFP is going out in January. The cost is about $1 million, and although it's focused on West County, the real focus is the 80 corridor, and this one is focused on the 680 corridor. I mean, I don't know why I'm asking this. I'm just curious. Are there any economies of scale? Is there any coordination that should be done between the two? Why would one study cost $1 million and the other one only $250,000? I'm just kind of looking for a little bit of clarification.
Mr. Chairman, I can respond to Commissioner Butt's question. I also got a question from Mr. Metcalf. But there's some big differences between the two studies. For one, in West County, you already have BART running up and down there to Richmond, and you have Capitol Corridor. You have long-term discussions about BRT that have already been vetted somewhat. And I think the West County study is much more broad-based. You're really looking at comprehensively at how that whole corridor works. And the options, I don't think, are very clear-cut at all, and there's a lot of controversy about a BART extension. It involves BART, of course. So it's really going to start from the very beginning, I think, and look very carefully at where people come from, where they go, and what the needs are, and what the options are, and the volume of ideas and options, I think, is much broader. I think it's actually a bigger corridor, a wider corridor, a longer corridor, and so I just think you're going to spend a lot more time and effort looking at all the various aspects of that corridor before you start to put ideas on paper and start to evaluate them. And once you do, there will be many of them, and it'll be a lot of work to develop the costs. Now that study too will build on previous study. There are West County BART extensions going back, I think, to the early 80s and 90s, and they have that information, so it's not going to be started from scratch. They'll be looking at all the history. There's also a lot more history, I think, in terms of previous studies. Is John Nemeth in the room? No, but I think John would be able to speak to it better than I could. But see, I'm not John, but I. Deidre, do you want to say something? She wants to wait.
Deidre Heitman, Principal Planner with BART's Hope. I've been helping WCTAC staff help develop the scope for the West County study. And there's a couple of key differences here. One is that in identifying the different options, we'll also be looking very carefully at things like alignment, station development, ridership patterns, transit integration, if there's rail options proposed, how that would interact with the local bus service. So those engineering aspects are a lot more detailed in this study than I think what you're looking at here. Where we could perhaps share resources, and we're still figuring that out with a study in Central County, is that there are new technologies in terms of looking at the travel markets, the origins and destinations that use cell phone technology, and I don't know that very well, but there, maybe we could buy a package together and save some costs there. It's not particularly expensive data, but in addition, in the West County study, we have a pretty robust public outreach process. We want people to understand that there are trade-offs in terms of the cost of a particular option versus other options that might serve the need of the community. So the study that WCTAC approved last Friday, actually the RFP is going to be released, I think, tomorrow. The intent, it will probably be a 12 to 18 month study, but we hope within the first 9 months, 9, 10, 11 months, that at least we would have enough travel market data and preliminary cost estimates to give to WCTAC to be able to inform any decision they might make going forward at that point. So I hope that answered your question.
I want to speak to this in terms of the fact that I've been around this for a long time. In fact, I even participated in that DKS study before I was on the BART board. So this is deja vu. But just speaking about what Lindsay was telling us, if you looked at the list of people who had feedback, Central County was very well represented in that. And Central County people vote. That you can rely on them to have a great interest in whatever we might come up with in the future if there is some sort of ballot measure. So there has to be something in that ballot measure to address their concerns. I think Newell was saying something like that, but also to manage their expectations. BART extensions, we need a study to show the costs of these different options and how they might progress over time. You might start with this and eventually get to that, so that people have realistic expectations. And only that can come from some sort of data that we can look at and show them and say, this is, we've looked at this. So I think that it's wise to do the smaller study right now, simply looking ahead at what might be coming down the pike in terms of a ballot measure.
Yeah, I appreciate Deidre's comments as well. At first, I really thought the full-blown study, starting from scratch, probably was the way to go. And I have to say that I think we can dust off the old one and enhance it considerably by looking particularly at the new technologies. And by that, I would say include in the way we do the research the new technologies, such as the megadata, which can give you traffic patterns and origin-destination studies just instantly. It can tell you hour by hour, minute by minute, where all the traffic is. And we saw an incredibly informative discussion of that at the last Focus on the Future conference. And they were telling us what they can do and how little it costs. I mean, the old origin-destination studies that we all sort of came up with are extinct. They are basically useless information, because by the time you finally get the data, things have changed. And so doing things that way, I think, makes a whole lot more sense. And employing some of those techniques, I think, are important to get current information. That, combined with the new technology that we see on the horizon, as well as what we've already looked at, to update that information, I think would be really important. I agree that we need to have something that will address the concerns of the many, many folks who are driving that corridor every single day. Every person I talk to who is in that corridor is ready to tear their hair out. And a simple example, my son too. My son no longer has any hair, and he's only 38. But he commutes from Clayton to Dublin every day, and he was telling me this afternoon that when he left Dublin, his phone told him it would take him an hour and 20 minutes to get home. And that's quick. He normally has over 2.5 hours at the time he gets off work at 4:30. And so, and yet when there's no traffic, it's a 40-minute drive. That's how bad the traffic is. And so, he goes in at 3 o'clock in the morning and tries to get out early if he can. But it's tough, and there are an awful lot of people in that boat. And frankly, an awful lot of those folks come from Central County who are on that roadway, and from East County. And, East County is getting out of the traffic mess out in East County now, but they sure don't need to get back into one on 680. So I think for everyone concerned, we need to find a way to alleviate it, because frankly, the spillover from the freeway winds up on the local streets in the San Ramon Valley. And San Ramon Valley Boulevard and Danville Boulevard and both sides of the road are getting, and frankly, my son is one of those. He knows every back neighborhood road to bypass the traffic, and he can cut his time back in half by getting off the road and going through every little neighborhood to wind his way back to the middle of Ignacio Valley Road. It's possible to be done. It's a puzzle. It's a maze, but you can do it. And so I think we need to figure that out. And so I am 100% in favor of going with option 2, but making sure that we make it really robust and we do it in the most innovative ways that we can, and really explore our options, and then include it with a good outreach program.
No. I'd be willing, I appreciate all the comments. I'd be willing to make a motion to recommend that we go with option 2 with sort of the option for some public outreach. go back to DK Associates, have them do the update as a robust study with innovative idea based on new data, and be objective in what can be done. As Gail said, I don't know that BART is a solution, but we ought to know. People are going to ask that.
We need to know the price tag.
Right. Know what all of those things are. BART did a study, by the way, just after that one was done. That can be pulled out, look at it, escalate the cost up. And Randy and I talked about there's some other really cool things that we could look at with technologies, and make sure that we go to SWAT and fully vet this and let them help put some input into this, since it is their region. And try to put a 6-month time frame from once we execute this to come back to us.
I'll second it, and I have a comment, if I can, that came from the planning committee that I added while I have DKS in the room. One of the things that had concerned me is at the start of the old survey, the old study, was Walnut Creek to Dublin. And we're kind of changing a little bit. This is a transit study, and Dublin is the Dublin-Pleasanton station, and I would like to see it, if possible, at least expanded in some of the transit study to Pleasant Hill, because we've been pushing that Pleasant Hill, Pleasanton, and it shows what will happen as we change through the 24 corridor. It also could help if we go after that bike sharing program I've been talking about, if somehow it's mentioned there. That's, it started out at $6.8 million on the peninsulas. It's not a small amount of money coming in. We know that Bishop Ranch is going to do it anyway. But I bring it up because several years back, Mike Szymanski and I were on East Bay Regional Park District when Gateway wanted something like that. And that, the other ways out, the other uses besides the single occupancy vehicle. If there's anything in the study without it getting crazy, fine. But if I didn't bring it up now, I'd feel.
Through the chair. Just kind of a question, Martin. Obviously, I'm for the smaller study. I guess what concerns me is are we adding or subtracting things for the $250,000 budget? Is there leeway in there? Can you add on to that? Is this firm kind of getting the message? Because I don't know what was added in, what was taken off. I just want to make sure if they have a study, they're going to pay for it, whether it's even a little bit higher, at least because you need the correct study. So I'm probably just worried about the discretionary funds to make sure it's done properly.
I can respond to that, Commissioner. Essentially tonight you're giving us direction that you want to go with option 2, with option 4. So there are several other steps. We are going to have to put together a scope of work, and we will work with the RTPC tax on that. We will bring you a new contract with DKS Associates to fund that study. You haven't approved the money tonight, and so you'll be able to see what's in and what's out and exactly how we're doing it. And that would probably be hopefully in January, no later than February, that we get the thing rolling. But you have more work to do before we get rolling on it. So this is just the.
Would that go back to PC?
Yes, it would.
Okay.
Well, point of order, when? Did you just put the December 7th meeting back on?
The earliest would be
January?
Would be February,
Okay.
Unless you want to take it directly in January. I would suggest you do it in February. We work in January to get the scope together. It's Christmas, okay? And we'll have it for you for approval in February, and we'll be able to really get rolling then, March, April, May.
All right, I have a motion and a second on the table.
But before we do that, Mr. Chair, I just want to know if we have anybody in the public who has any comments about the item.
Nobody gave me a speaker
Okay,
card.
all right. Just thought I would check. Thank you.
So I have a first by Arnrick.
Happy holidays, Commissioners. I just wanted to say thank you for the support over the last year, the tough questions, the great answers, and all that. We as staff really appreciate that. There are 5 things I want to talk about very quickly. One, we held a tech series on using how to use asphalt rubber, and the Department of Resources in the California state government has a rebate program that if you use asphalt rubber, they'll rebate not only the city, but they have an innovative way of buying asphalt rubber pavement in bulk. And if we can get 3, so this is where bundling, where we don't actually do the design and the administration, the cities, but we buy in bulk 10,000 tons of asphalt rubber. And after that tech series, the city of Moraga came back, or the town of, is it town or city? The town of Moraga came back, their engineer, and said, we're interested. The town of Moraga, I just want to say, you know, you had some bad experience with asphalt rubber, but I'm a strong proponent for asphalt rubber. And so Jack set that up. We're looking at, see if we can do that this year. The program ends this year, but if we could have done that in the past and bought 20,000 tons and we all buy, it's a city furnished material, you would have gotten a couple $100,000 back in a rebate, and we would have got a couple $100,000. So we're still looking at that. So that's one innovation. I did attend the CalCog meeting. I attend every CalCog meeting only because our vice chair is going to be the president of CalCog. So it was a 2-hour discussion on affordable housing, sustainable communities, and how difficult the rules are. And there was a long discussion about how to qualify and who's going to oversee. And so stay tuned, and we'll try to bring you some better information back through the legislative process on that. Peter Engels applied for almost $1 million in grant. My understanding is we've gotten approved through MTC for a electric vehicle car share program that we're going to try to roll out in the western part of Contra Costa County. It's an exciting opportunity to do a car share program to link to the BART stations there in El Cerrito and Richmond. I think that's one of the things that we don't think in terms of as connection devices. We also, my understanding is we got approved for $500,000. I haven't gotten that letter, for this idea of connection protection, dynamic routing, and real-time ride-sharing with the partnership between UC Berkeley, Caltrans, and us, and Tri-Delta Transit. I got a verbal approval, but I haven't seen it in writing. And then congratulations, the BART connector opened. But the last thing I want to talk about was this thing that we made. It's a new technology. I did call the COO, my friend Gabe Klein, about this. It's called Bridge. It's non-demand transportation system using small shuttles and, as Julie heard, very smart analytics. And so the idea is you can stand on a corner, flag down through your smart device a shuttle, and the shuttle will come and get you and take you to your BART station or take you to your end destination. So it's an on-demand shuttle service, and we've made a phone call. US DOT is going to fund 6 to 8 of these small pilots throughout the nation. We think we're very innovative here in Contra Costa, and so we're looking at BART and maybe Triple CTA and CCTA to do a pilot. So we're going to try to put something together. I think Peter has the con on that, right? Peter's in charge of that application, so look forward to that. And thank you once again for all of your support. And that's my report.
Thank you. I skipped over the commissioner comments. Julie.
Yes, I do have a comment. And yes, MTC at our meeting this afternoon did approve that $973,000 for the car share program primarily for West County, but it's a car share for all, I think is the name of the bid, and that was part of the vote. And yes, I am now officially a member of MTC.
Congratulations. David.
Yeah, just a reminder that PC is canceled in January. Randy's afraid of the 2-minute meeting.
Mike.
Yeah, I'd like, for whoever's responsible for the decorations in here, I'd like to thank them for that. Denise says she had nothing to do with it. I told her she should take the bow. But it's really, really pleasant.
I think that was Peter and Lindsay and Irene, yeah, and Diane, yeah.
Okay.
They're wonderful.
Anybody else? Bob.
One comment, because we won't be here. I don't know in this group, we might be meeting December 24, but I have a feeling we probably won't. To all the staff and Randy and people, every one of you, thank God you have staff. We do. You make us look good. And the other issue, be safe with your families. Have a wonderful Christmas and a very happy New Year. I hope the plan lands where you want, Lindsay, and be wearing those right apparel. But everything, I wish everybody a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And I'm putting my hat back on.
No. On to item number 8, calendar. Any questions, comments? Before we adjourn, we're going to adjourn this meeting in memory of Eunice Barbara Jackson Beck, Brad Beck's mother, who recently passed away. With that, we are adjourned. Food's getting cold.